The Tomorrow War is a dumb movie. A Frankenstein's monster of a script awkwardly cobbled together from the decomposing pieces of other, better films,
Yes.
with paper-thin characters, a plot riddled with holes and contrivances, and dialogue so cheesy that it feels like it came from some aborted Michael Bay movie from the early 2000s. By any conventional standard, it's an objectively bad movie that YouTube critics like myself could probably spend hours happily picking apart, and yet it's also surprisingly fun. It's a film that kept me engaged and entertained for the bulk of its runtime, that somehow made me warm to its cast of goofy, cartoonish characters, and left me feeling weirdly upbeat with its charmingly old-fashioned, happily ever after ending. What the is this movie and what's it done to me? As I've come to understand in my time as a movie critic, there's nothing more hilarious and cringe-inducing than a dumb as movie masquerading as something high-minded and serious. And God knows, we've seen enough of them over the past few years. But on the flip side, a film that recognises its own limitations and decides, it, I just don't care, I'm here to have fun. Well, part of me can't help but respect it. And The Tomorrow War falls firmly into the latter category. It's not going to win any Oscars, that's for sure.
Absolutely
In fact,
not.
it's a pretty mediocre story that's barely saved by a talented cast and some decent action scenes. But in a way, none of that seems to matter. It doesn't need anyone's approval. It's not out to win critical praise or meaningless awards, and it's definitely not out to make the world a better place by lecturing everyone on how evil they are. It's a simple, undemanding, old-fashioned kind of movie that's out to do one thing: entertain its audience. And somehow, through some combination of luck and black magic, it actually works. I don't understand
How did he not break
it,
the
but let's
vial
take
when
a
he
look
did
at it
that?
together and see if we can figure it out. The movie opens in the year 2022 with our main man, Dan Forrester, a former soldier now working as a high school science teacher. He's basically an average family man with an average life, but he desperately wants to be something more, and his frustration is compounded when he fails to land a big job he's been applying for. He's just sitting down to watch a football game with his family when a wormhole opens in the middle of the pitch and a bunch of futuristic soldiers come pouring through. Before you can say exposition dump, the new arrivals promptly inform the world that they're from 30 years in the future and they need help. A race of alien monsters known as the White Spikes have infested the planet and humanity is getting its kicked. Using their remaining resources, they were able to open a wormhole back to before the invasion began, and now they need troops and weapons to help the war efforts. Now, you're probably thinking, isn't this a really bad idea to take tens of thousands of people from the past and send them into a future where they'll almost certainly get killed and removed from the timeline? Won't that kind of up future history and further reduce the world's population in the future? But don't worry, the script is like, nah, it'll be fine.
Not a great plan.
Anyway, as the war drags on, the world starts running low on soldiers, forcing them to introduce mass conscription. And wouldn't you know it, Dan the man gets called up to fight. Naturally, he's not too keen on this, so he goes to his estranged father James for help in removing the tracking device that he's been fitted with. But then he decides he's still mad at him and tells him to get I'm sure this won't be relevant later in the story. Anyway, Dan the man gets zapped into the future with a motley bunch of untrained civilians, and it goes pretty much as well as you'd expect. However, Dan manages to complete his first mission and reports back to his new commanding officer, who happens to be a woman in her late 30s with the same surname as him. Whatever could this mean?
I'm Mary Forrester.
I'm Mary Forrester.
You serious?
Wow, what are the odds that Dan's daughter would be one of the few people still left alive on planet Earth? Anyway, she explains that they've been busy developing a toxin to kill the aliens, and all the conscripts from the past have basically just been cannon fodder to prolong the war long enough for them to finish their work. With the war all but lost, their plan is to send the toxin back to the past so it's ready to use when the aliens first arrive. I love how the movie frames this as some kind of crazy mind-bending revelation when it seems like a totally obvious course of action to anyone who doesn't need help dressing themselves in the morning. In fact, why even bother with this toxin bullshit in the first place? If you know where and when the aliens are going to first show up, how about mobilizing the entire world's military to blow them up? Or just plant a big old nuclear bomb there and detonate it the moment they arrive? I mean, I'm pretty sure a thermonuclear blast to the face would solve the problem pretty quickly, toxin or no toxin. But hey, I guess we need a plot device to fight over. So they develop their toxin and the aliens attack their base just as Dan's preparing to jump back into the past, and somehow the battle destroys pretty much everything except the time machine. Wow, that's lucky. And Dan's daughter sacrifices herself to buy him enough time to escape. Back in the present, Dan figures out that the aliens don't actually arrive in the future. They've been frozen under the ice all this time, and it's only global warming that eventually melts it and releases them.
You serious?
Like, the best scientific minds on the planet never
perfect.
considered this possibility before.
Thank
Nobody
you.
thought to scout out the aliens' future landing site
No
just
one.
in case there was anything suspicious
No one
about
thought
it.
about this.
Not a great plan.
Anyway, because this is a big dumb action flick, the movie culminates in a big dumb action sequence where Dan the man, his dad James, and a ragtag group of friends head to Russia to find the aliens and kill them, preventing the future war from ever happening. And of course, it ends with a final battle against an alien queen that tries to escape the carnage.
Fist fight.
Then everyone goes home and lives happily ever after. And that's it. That's the plot for the Tomorrow War. I said at the start of this review that this movie is a bit of a dumb Frankenstein's monster
Yes.
that liberally borrows ideas from a bunch of other films, and
They're
it's
in the
not
same
hard to see
scenes.
the influences here. Everything from Starship Troopers to Aliens to Back to the Future
Starship
to
Troopers,
Edge
thank
of
you, see?
Tomorrow is repurposed and recycled to fit the needs of this story. I mean, damn, I know they say if you're gonna steal, steal from the best, but shamelessly ripping off such well-known movies is only going to invite unfavourable comparisons to them. It also leaves Tomorrow War lacking a strong identity of its own, failing to bring anything new or
Right.
interesting to the table. Time travel, with all its pitfalls and paradoxes, is a pretty difficult thing to work into any story without it becoming more convoluted than a Christopher Nolan movie, but I
Yes.
think Tomorrow War's simplistic writing actually works in its favour here. It never gets bogged down in paradoxes and predestination because it basically chooses to ignore them, and it encourages you to do the same.
I suggest you don't worry about this sort of thing and just enjoy yourself. That goes for you all, too.
I love that.
Yes.
The characters are a real mixed
love that
bag
scene.
here. The main focus is on Dan and his daughter and the radical shift in their relationship
Right.
when they reunite as adults in the future. They start out awkward and distant, but gradually reconnect as they get closer to their goal, only to be torn apart again just when salvation seems to be in sight. Yvonne Strahovski does a great job playing the grown-up version of Muri, who had to watch her world slowly fall apart and is determined to save it at any cost. And when you learn what became of her father in the future, you totally understand why she's distant towards him. The problem is that Dan's character doesn't really support this. The script implies that he's unhappy with his mundane life
Right.
and desperate to be doing something more, but he already has a decent job, a
Right.
nice house and a loving family, and there's no real suggestion that his ambition is causing friction between them. It would have made more sense to show them struggling to get by, maybe causing arguments between Dan and his wife because he's neglecting the family.
Something
But nah,
to
he's just
highlight it.
portrayed as a loving husband and doting father right from the start, willing to do anything to protect the people he loves. So there's really no foundation to build his character development on.
Right.
If anything, his own father
agree with
James
that.
is the one with a meaningful character arc here. He starts out as a grouchy survivalist type, estranged from his family after walking out on them years earlier, only to eventually reconcile with Dan and redeem himself by the end, willing to sacrifice his own life to save his son. Damn, a movie that dares to portray fathers in a positive light as caring and self-sacrificing protectors, instead of useless, pathetic deadbeats who need to be shown the way by their strong female counterparts, even suggesting that sometimes their departure can be a little more complicated than he's just a selfish hole. No wonder the media hated this movie. This is just the kind of wholesome, old-fashioned portrayal of men and family unity that modern Hollywood is desperately trying to stamp out. Because why make films that appeal to the overwhelming majority of regular people
Thank you.
when you can pander to the 0.1% of
I'm
miserable
triggered.
assholes that make the most noise on social media? The supporting characters are the weakest part of this movie. They're basically cardboard cutouts with one defining character trait apiece, and it's a real shame because there's some interesting potential to them. Like Dorian, a veteran jumper
He
who's
was
dying
dope.
of cancer but never gets the screen time he needs to make his death impactful. Or Hart, a leader of the future military whose arrival at the start of the movie seems to imply she'll be an important character, only to disappear until like the last 15 minutes. And the thing is, it's not like I can blame the runtime for their lack of development.
No.
Tomorrow War is almost 2.5 hours
Right.
long, so there's more than enough time to flesh out everyone involved. The problem is that the movie wastes too much time on bloated, inefficient scenes between Dan and his daughter, to the detriment of everyone else. Which brings me along to another big issue with this film, the pacing. It's a bit all over the place, to be honest, quickly glossing over stuff
That's
that
the
should
editing,
probably
though.
be explained in more detail, and slowing down to a crawl when it should be hurtling towards the finale. Like the team's first mission in the future, where they have to evacuate a building before an airstrike flattens the whole place, only for them to slowly creep down a stairwell as they try to sneak past a group of aliens.
felt like a Michael Bay
You can't
scene.
go from a desperate race against time to a high-tension stealth sequence in the same scene, guys. It just doesn't work. Even worse is the aftermath of Dan's return from the future, which kills the pace and feels like the kind of reflective epilogue that should happen at the end, when everything else has been resolved. As it stands, it feels like a movie with two different endings, like they tried to graft another big action finale onto the one they already had.
Right.
It's a real shame that the script makes basic errors like these, because I think there was potential to do something special with this movie. The action sequences are decent, the cast is competent, and the right intentions are definitely there, and if they just spent a bit more time ironing out the pacing and writing issues, it could have been something genuinely great.
That's true.
As it stands, it's a mediocre story elevated by a bigger budget and better cast than it probably deserves. Ultimately, The Tomorrow War is a simple, undemanding kind of film that doesn't aspire to be anything more than a fun, action-packed sci-fi adventure. And in that respect, well, it does the job. It doesn't do it in a particularly smart or elegant way, but it does it all the same.
Yeah.
And goddamn, I actually came out of it feeling strangely good. Like I'd been entertained by people who wanted to make me happy, instead of being berated and lectured by snooty, pretentious who despise my very existence. Is this what movies used to be like? I honestly can't remember anymore. Whatever. For once, I don't feel the need to drown my sorrows with a bottle of toilet duck. And in my mind, that calls for a celebration. Break out the turpentine. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
That was actually perfect. Spot on. Right on target. On point. This is one of my first Critical Drinker videos I've seen. I think I saw like one other one. I can't remember what it was, but still technically one of the first. And he's on point with this. I think the biggest factor, and one that I've seen in tweets and on Facebook and things of that nature, were how people were ragging the movie because there wasn't anything different from the family. Like there was no LGBTQ type representation, all that kind of stuff, which I was like, why does that have to be an issue for it to be good or not? Like, it makes no sense. You had a father who loves his family so much that he was willing to go and, do this. Well, he was made to go, really. But he, in the end, he ended up going, and he knew that he was the one that had to save everybody. I like the piece he talks about where when the daughter says, you left us and you abandoned the family and we're not close anymore. There was nothing previous to that led the audience to believe that was a true thing that could happen. Like, even when it happened, I was like, I guess there needs to be some kind of discord between them in the future, so it's a different type of relationship. I get it, whatever. But we didn't see that. We didn't see it happen. We didn't see any evidence that was going to happen between him and his wife or anything. He was a loving husband. He wanted to do what was best for his family. He wanted a better life for himself, and he knew that would make a better life for his family. So that was a little bit weak. I do agree that his father has the best arc because, he abandoned his son and his wife at the time and completely. And then at the end, he's trying to kind of make up for that by sacrificing himself. But in the end, everybody lives and well, not everybody. A lot of side characters die. It was a fun movie. I'm wondering what they'll do with the sequel, though. The sequel that they're already, in the process of making, is it going to kind of play on the same beats, or are they going to try to do something different and original for this next film? Which obviously we know, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, in the end they see that there are aliens that brought these creatures with them in the ship. They were actually cargo. These creatures, the white spikes, were cargo on this ship, and the aliens that were bringing them were different, looked different. So we know that there's other life out there and all that kind of stuff. So will that play into a sequel? From my view, it looked like they crash landed and they weren't actually trying to bring these things to Earth, unless that was the mission. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out in the sequel. So there's potential. I like what they did there. It felt like a standalone film, but they can make more from it. And this, to his point, is really how movies were, back in the day. You had a movie that came out, maybe there weren't plans for a sequel, but it did so well, they're like, hey, let's make a sequel of this. Let's expand the story. And this one does do it in a good way. even though the pacing and the writing and the editing is really all janky. Like, it felt like a Michael Bay movie at certain times. It felt just very, very chaotic in the worst ways, like most Michael Bay movies. So I'm hoping they kind of change that up and kind of ease up on how they go about the action, and especially the dialogue in the movie. So the story needs to be a whole lot better, I know that. But those are my thoughts though. You guys know mostly what I think. This is some additional things, but you know mostly what I think from my advanced screening and also from watching the Tomorrow War pitch meeting as well. But I just wanted to do some additional stuff and finally do a critical drinker reaction, because you guys have been asking me to do that, a few of you, for a while. So here you go. Thanks so much to my hyper crew as always: Brian Tidwell, Steve O, Slepnear, K6013, Portal on Mobile 44, Dash Milner, and Daniel Lopez. Thank you guys so much for being part of that crew. To all my members and subscribers, thank you so much for supporting the channel. I really do appreciate it. While you're still here, hit that like button. It does help out the channel. It lets me know what you guys want to see. You can also check out our most popular videos on the channel, and you can see our most recent reaction right up there. If you've seen all that, I'll see you guys in the comments. We'll talk about this.